Welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. If you enjoy our content, please like or subscribe.
Hi, welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. I'm DV LeBron. Do you got things you want to get done around your house? Maybe you want to get a pergola done or something. Check out K&H Construction out of Waxahachie. Chris Holmes. He's a local guy, been in Waxahachie. Let him know DV LeBron sent you. Today, my very special guest is Councilman-elect Mr. Kasey Cheshire.
Cheshire, close enough. There you go.
Cheshire, how you doing, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Hey, and just DV, I just want to take a moment just to thank you for having me on the show today. I've watched it several times. This is the first time for me to actually be logging on in person, but no, thank you for creating this podcast, allowing the community really to have the accessibility to their elected officials. And, for me, as I step into this role, I would love to sit down and chat with all 45,000 residents of Midlothian, but I know realistically that isn't possible. And so I'm really thankful for your efforts to do this podcast and giving your free time to chat today, and more importantly, just to share those conversations. But no, again, my name is Kasey Cheshire. I'm the I'm incoming council-elect. I'm excited to have the opportunity to serve this community a new way. And Midlothian has been home to my family for many years. My wife and I, we actually moved to Midlothian in 2009, and we're raising 3 kids. We've got a 15, 13, and 9-year-old. They're all going through the Midlothian ISD Public School District. And, as you look at those ages, we're at a very fun and busy stage of life in the Cheshire household. But I'm honored to step up to serve Midlothian City Council and deeply care about where this community is headed. So.
This was an interesting election cycle when it comes to the city council, and even one of the seats for MISD, where the existing candidate, the incumbents, had declared and then decided they couldn't run for various reasons, and then you had put your name in the hat, and so had the former mayor Reno put his name in the hat, and then the incumbents didn't run, so you ended up pretty much by default that you came in because nobody else ran against you, or it wasn't 3 people in that race, so you came in. So it was a little bit different this year. But, I've known you in the community. You've done a lot in the community, and I know you care. What made you want to really step into this? Because there's a lot of challenges, and we're going to discuss that.
No, absolutely. Hey, and thanks for mentioning that up front. I had the opportunity to run unopposed in place 2 on the Midlothian City Council, and I'm really incredibly thankful for that trust that's being placed to me by the community. But at the same time, I do feel the weight of that trust. This is an important role, and I don't take that lightly at all. And really, I'm committed to doing the hard work. And honestly, that's already started for me, over the past 2.5 months there. I think it was February 13th was that filing deadline. I've been preparing for this term. I've attended workshops. I've participated in the council retreat. I've been spending time meeting one-on-one with the key department directors to better understand the work that's happening across the city. And so definitely want to thank those directors for taking the time to connect already. But, for me, I have a heart and passion for this city. I love this city. I want to continue to make sure it's moving forward in a healthy way. And as I step into the role, I want to make sure I'm showing up prepared from day one and ready to serve. And really, this role has really just kind of feels like a continuation of the years and community involvement of service that I've already been able to contribute.
Yeah, you've been involved with the hospital stuff. You've been involved with the Lions Club. Can you kind of tell the people kind of the things you've been dabbling in the last few years?
Yeah, well, a few years. It's been quite a bit. Yeah, no, I guess, I'll kind of start just from a professional standpoint. I kind of grew up in the Duncanville area. And then my wife and I, we moved back here in 2009. We really kind of planted roots in Midlothian and decided to call it home. And from a professional background, again, I was a director of operations at the independent pharmacy in the downtown corridor in Duncanville. And then after I've left that organization, I actually went to work to serve as the executive director of United Way here in Ellis County. And so really, if you're not familiar with that organization, we're really trying to mobilize the resources, obviously donor dollars and volunteers to really try to address the key needs and the gaps in the region. And then kind of got onboarded when Methodist Midlothian Medical Center opened up. So I wasn't planning to leave United Way, but just had an opportunity that couldn't pass up, with a hospital right in my backyard. But, I serve as the director of community relations and volunteer services there. And, we really continue to build on the healthcare service line, support the frontline staff here. And obviously when residents do need healthcare services, we want to get them on the road to recovery. But yeah, I mean, alongside just professional standpoint, I have a long history of community service, and that's inside and outside of the professional roles. I'm trying to think of all of them. I've served on the Midlothian Chamber of Commerce Board. I've been helping with Unite Ellis to a certain extent, on the Midlothian Senior Center, the Heights of Ellis County. I've actually served on my church's personnel committee. That was some long nights there. But also helped support the school district on some of their growth management committees. Actually, 2 of those I participated along with the, I think it was a 21 growth management committee for the city as well. County-wise, some people don't know this, but actually I still serve on this organization, but I served as a chair as well. I served as the chair for the Emergency Food and Shelter Board, which is sort of a county initiative that kind of allocate some of our, I guess, federal funds to different organizations, and then actually led our Ellis County 2020 census efforts as well. So that was a lot of fun. And you did mention club, and I want to pause on that one because that one, for whatever reason, I mean, I grew up in Duncanville, and it was a very strong presence of Lions in that community. And my dad was one, my grandfather was one. And so it was sort of kind of like, what I knew I was supposed to do, right? But I've been a Lion for probably 20 years, 7 of those here in Midlothian. I've actually served as past president and the zone chair for Ellis County, but it really is instilled into be a very service-oriented leadership kind of mindset. And I always believe that leadership isn't about a title. It's about service. It's about stepping up, getting involved, and leaving things better than when I found them. And so for me, that's the mindset that I'm really hoping to bring into this council.
Let's talk about governing philosophy, because ultimately your principles are, that's what's going to happen, whatever your principles are. So what is the proper role of a councilman in the lives of the people of Midlothian?
Yeah, I mean, the council per se is really kind of setting strategic direction, for the community. Obviously, we oversee budget. That's one of our main objectives, is just ensuring that we're doing the budget workshops appropriately. This will be my first go around to go through that process, and I'll be kind of drinking from a fire hose, when we get to that in July, and really just kind of working alongside Chris Dick and Dory and Clyde. It's one of those deals. Council's not necessarily should be getting into the weeds. We really should be equipping our city leadership and our city departments to do the work that they're being hired to do. So for me, it's really just, setting proper, healthy direction, and then, backing that up with a healthy budget as well.
What is your philosophy when it comes to taxes? Because property taxes is something that we always have a conversation about. So tell me about that.
Yeah, when you start talking about taxes, for me, it's making sure that we're being good stewards of those dollars that are being allocated to the city. I'll give really kudos to several of the councils that have come before us about really putting those healthy parameters. I guess it's the homestead exemptions and stuff like that, to really keep that burden as low as possible for taxpayers. And again, I'm not one of those. I'm not a huge fan of property taxes as it is. But, it is the mechanism that we are utilizing at this time to fund those core services. And so I think it's extremely important that we're being good stewards of those dollars, working with the appropriate directors, making sure that we're being efficient. We're not being wasteful. We're really deep and digging in deeply to ensure that they're being as efficient as possible, putting those dollars to work.
What are some of the ways you plan on being transparent for the people of Midlothian? Because there's a lot that happens in the city, and your constituency knowing what's going on is important. What are your plans for transparency?
Yeah, I mean, to me, transparency is crucial. And, I kind of want to briefly just kind of talk about sort of my progress to get to where I feel like that I'm ready to kind of serve, and things that we've done even to improve transparency with the Midlothian Community Development Corporation. Because for those of y'all that did not know, I've actually served as the treasurer and then really the immediate, past president for the Midlothian Community Corporation. And for those of y'all that are not aware, that's we're appointed by council to serve in that role, and really it's our sales tax dollars. And again, that's a half-cent sales tax dollar that's split between economic and community development corporations. And there's a board of 7, and we make recommendations to council on how to invest those dollars. And to kind of give some context to when I stepped into that position, it was about a year into them finally having a staff member that was sort of positioned to serve as the executive director over that particular entity. Prior was just board involvement. And so we went into a process of really trying to identify, okay, what were some of the opportunities with that particular organization? How we can improve it? And on our 5-year strategic plan was infrastructure. And I'm a process-oriented guy. And so I really sat down and looked at that organization. I wanted to ensure that we were creating stronger organizational infrastructure. We were putting clear goals, objectives tied to those grant cycles. And for that, it was the promotional grants that we were really getting a lot of conversations about. We improved financial reporting. We created better transparency and accountability. And so, again, for me, ensuring every taxpayer was tied to measurable outcomes, long-term community impact, that's important. And good stewardship for me starts with really that strong systems that are in place. And so we really went to work to ensure that transparency was top of priority with MCDC. And again, that's the same kind of priority as I'm looking at stepping into this role. I want to make sure that transparency is out there, that everything is being done in a public sector, is being done on that dais, and no decisions are being made behind closed doors. Again, we owe that responsibility to the public to ensure that they're involved in the conversation and seeing what's going on as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much going on, and even that the economic development, the city is growing so much, and there's so many things that are coming, and it's starting to go away from being like a bedroom community, and it's starting to get into more balance. There's starting to be more balance, more places to shop, more places to go. I saw your video on Tom Thumb, that Tom Thumb opened up on 1387. So it's there's a lot going on in the city. What are your thoughts on growth and how you will approach it as one of all the council members?
Yeah, so that really kind of ties into just what my vision and sort of the goals for the next 3 years. And growth for me, I'm not anti-growth by any means, but I'm also pro-smart growth. We can't have a reactive type approach to it. We've got to be planning ahead. We've got to look at our future land use map that's been, again, we appointed community members to kind of help dictate where the capacity should be and where the density should be. So we should be doing our best to follow that one. We've got to make sure that our infrastructure is really keeping pace with the development and again, protecting that quality of life, preserving Midlothian's character. There's so many things, when I think about my vision and goals that really kind of tie into those other two. But no, we've got to make sure that, growth should be intentional and growth should be healthy. So I think that's key for me.
Yes. And it's coming. When you look at 5 years out or even, I think the term is 3 years, right?
I'll do a 3-year term. Yes, sir.
When you look, what is something that you'd like to complete? Would you say is a success if this is done by the time you're done with your first term?
Well, I will say I've already heard it over the last 2.5 months of me running unopposed, right? As people have come up to me and started talking. And then really it's even as we just had a survey that we just got some results for from a recent council workshop, where everyone is really talking about the road infrastructure, and had opportunity to meet with our director, Adam, not too long ago, and really kind of looking at, what are some things right now that we're doing to, first of all, address city roads, because really that's our ultimate responsibility. And so make sure what they're doing from a traffic planning standpoint, some things they're trying to doing from a sidewalk and a connectivity, which I'm really big on that, which I'll talk about here shortly. But, some of the things that we've been hearing a lot of as well is some of the bigger roads, the 287s, the 1387, the 663. A lot of those roads are outside of city control. Those are TxDOT. And so for me, as I look at that, we've really got to continue moving the needle on advocating for those dollars, making sure our, county commissioners, our judge, even our state rep, our representatives that are serving at a higher level are really fighting for those dollars for Ellis County and bringing those to Midlothian, because, we've got some gaps there, and we've got to improve really the traffic flow and some of those key corridors. And we've got to open up the accessibility as we can do, from a city standpoint. And I mean, those have been some big concerns that I'm hearing. I'm hoping we're making some big movement on that in the next 3 years. And the other thing, infrastructure isn't just about roads as well. It's sidewalks, it's trails, it's parks, it's the way that you're making the community feel connected. And so I think that walkable and accessible, town is healthy, it's vibrant. For those of y'all that don't know, I'm a hardcore runner. You probably see me running in your neighborhood over the years, but I can remember when there was nothing. And so we're moving some needle there. We're getting a little bit better, but I think we could do a whole lot better over the long term and making sure that we are connected.
What's the one thing people were talking to you about when it came to the roads? Was there a particular one they wanted you to address when you're elected?
Yeah, I mean, I really, most of them, to be honest with you, do feel like they're funneling through the TxDOT, through the major thoroughfares, 663 and 1387 primarily. And so I think that's where we've got to continue to look at the, other feeder roads out of there, the other Most of it's north-south to a certain extent, but, connectivity from 663 over to 14th. We've got to look at some opportunities on 1387, even if there's other, Hayes Road connecting over towards 287. I mean, there's lots of different long-term plans, that Adam shared with me recently of things that they're trying to do to really kind of ease the traffic on those major corridors. So I know trust me, there's conversations happening already on trying to improve that, but I think we really got to continue to advocate and push for that locally, but more importantly at our state level as well.
When it comes to the other infrastructure things that people were talking about, one of the main complaints I see online is the water and sewage prices. A lot of people think they're astronomical, they're going up. And while you're not on the council right now, is that something that you'd like to address if you're put in or when you're put in?
Yeah, I mean, definitely something I'm looking to. I just mentioned, before meeting with those directors to do sort of one-on-one tours. And, Adam actually took me to the East lift station, which that's one of those things it's not really exciting to see that, but it's an important standpoint from a waste management component. And really, he talked about, we talked about the density earlier, but, he was just basically kind of sharing with me that, that particular station was really put into place just because of some of the stuff that's kind of going on the Bridgewater development. So that's one lift station just for that area. And so, yeah, I think it's very important that we look at, from a cost perspective, I don't know necessarily the calculations on how they're doing that at this point. That's something that I definitely would, definitely kind of take to heart and try to learn to a certain extent. But I do feel like we've got to make sure that we are ensuring that infrastructure, not only the roads, but the waste management, the water, being able to sustain the growth that's coming to Midlothian and really all of Ellis County.
When it comes to like Bridgewater, I believe that's either a mud or a pit. And that's a conversation that people have been having about these things, about muds and pits. What is your opinion on that? Is that something that you agree with, would like tackled, would go to Austin to talk to representatives about?
Yeah, I mean, open to conversations with representatives just to see kind of the efficiency and what's needed there. I mean, for me, it is ensuring that we're focusing in on the core services that the city's able to kind of offer, and just the accountability for that. So
we have a conversation in the public now about data centers. Now, I know there's one here in Midlothian, and some people have very negative thoughts about data centers. In the case that maybe there was another one built, what is your opinion on those going forward?
Yeah, from the conversation that I've looked at, most of it has to do with the water usage. And again, was talking to Adam, who is another one, or sorry, Mike Adams, which is another one of our directors recently. And, he was kind of just being transparent about the initial usage that was sort of kind of, projected based on the Google data center, that it has not hit up to the capacity what they were anticipating. Again, I'm not at this point well-versed in if there's any other projected plans for another expansion of that Google facility. It has not been brought to the city's attention as I know at this point. But, we have very structured places in place for that heavy industry. I don't anticipate us to having too much more growth that we're seeing in other parts of this region.
You know that politics can get contentious. Ellis County is not immune to some of the things that hit when it comes to politics, some of the ugly stuff. And I've been vocal online about people, being neighbors. You once these elections are done, you got to be around each other. This place is not big enough to where you don't see each other again. You're going to run into each other, and trying to keep that. How important is it to you to develop those relationships with the other council members so that you can govern effectively?
It's huge for me. I want to make sure that I'm being very respectful and very tactful, even in times of disagreement. Again, we are neighbors, right? And we all come into a situation with different lenses and perspectives, and we should be able to respect those when we're having conversations. And for me, that good leadership does start with listening. Whether or not it's a planning and zoning case, an ordinance, or or whatever it might look like that's on the agenda for that that particular meeting, I have to respect different viewpoints. I actually want to hear that. I want to see the perspective and the lens that maybe I'm not considering. It's going to help that decision be better in the long term. But I've always been one of those, if it's a board meeting or whatever that might look like, I've been able to ask those tough questions, to have healthy disagreement, but in the same standpoint, I've been able to go grab a burger, afterwards, and again, just, making sure that, we are being respectful of each other. So yeah, I think that's huge. It's a way that I have led in some of the other roles that I've served in different organizations, and my commitment to that group as well, that I'll do that. So
Tell me, what is your philosophy when it comes to the city? You mentioned Chris Dick, who's a great city manager. He's been doing it a long time. Had him on the show. Hopefully, I'll have him on during this budget season, just kind of talk about what's going on with the city. But that's your one employee when you kind of look at the
Absolutely.
city and the structure. That's your one employee. What is going to be your philosophy with when it comes to accountability? Because sometimes they get it wrong, and you're the conduit for the community. You're the watchdog for the community. You're representing the community. They vote you in for this, and sometimes you might have to be a little bit rough with them. Is that something, in a respectful way, you might have to ask tough questions? Tell me, what is going to be your philosophy with that? How are you going to approach that?
Yeah, accountability is huge. I know, particularly when we're dealing with Chris, and really he kind of has the kind of a dual team there at the top. It's Dory, who's relatively new, and then Clyde. But yeah, definitely, as we have oversight over that one employee, it is ensuring that we are being able to ask those tough questions, make sure that it is aligning with the will of the people, the will of the council, and again, I think that's paramount that we're able to have that transparency with him and that openness with him as well. And and I mentioned earlier, that for me, and this is sort of one of my goals for the city as well, as I kind of think about where they need to go is, I'm a process systems guy, like I mentioned, but good government should be efficient. It should be responsive. It should be accountable. And so, I want to work with Chris. I want to ensure that we do have efficient city operations. I want to make sure that they are, looking through their budgets, looking through their strategic planning, making sure it's aligning what we already have in the place and some of the new objectives moving forward. Yes, we want to support city staff and departments, but again, that accountability is the key part, in my opinion. I mentioned already, it's stewardship. When we're talking about our taxpayer dollars, we are being tasked, the 7 of us on council, to ensure that those taxpayer dollars are being put to good use. I'm not afraid to ask those tough questions. I commit to doing it in a way that honors and respects Chris and the city staff that's there. But again, I want to make sure that that is a big piece of what we're doing. And I want to make sure that we do have those strong systems and processes in place to allow them to perform at a high level and making sure that every taxpayer dollar counts.
You've kind of been on the outside looking in, but you've been involved in different things in the community. What process would you like to see improved that you've seen, that you've been able, and you've looked at, you said, maybe we can do that better? Is there something like that you've seen?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's just like if you're putting in permits to a certain extent, there's a lot of even paper trail at certain times that I feel like can be more automated. And I feel like that's one. I feel like even sometimes there's agenda items that I'm like wondering, can we empower staff to go ahead and, I don't know whether it's a special event or something silly as that. We're actually having that on, typically it's on a consent, but we're actually having sometimes that we're in a sense having to waste our time per se, where we maybe should be focusing on other bigger initiatives. So I think it's really one of those things we need to look and see, what can we be positioning and pushing over to staff and what is needed, from a council oversight standpoint. Some of the stuff that I've seen might work for a city that was, maybe 12,000 when I first moved here in 2009. But, now that we're encroaching 45,000, maybe it's not necessarily needed to be on a council agenda. So I think we just got to really be transparent with Chris and staff to really look and see what are those processes and what are those things that we could tweak. And then, they've already mentioned a few of them that they're kind of working on from a finance standpoint, but I think they're trying to look at some just internal computer software and systems as well that again, might cost a little bit up front, but again, could help them over time just be more efficient with those tax dollars. So I just want them to be very strategic about thinking through that and just ensuring that we are not wasting our time when it comes down to it.
Right. I haven't done my yearly crime update with Chief Smith, and I am going to reach out to him, but I did it with Chief Weiser in Waxahachie, and I also did it with the district attorney, Miss Beatty, just kind of give an update on what is going on crime-wise. And there is a lot going on crime-wise. There's a lot more going on crime-wise now that, populations are growing and they've exploded and more houses. It's just the nature of the beast. There's some things that are up on the uptick, juvenile crime, etc. When it comes to law enforcement, what is your opinion on that, on funding it every year? What are some of the things you'd like to do to support the chief in his mission? Because every year they're going to come up to you in a budget and they require something. There's a lot of tools that Chief Weiser was talking about in the Waxahachie side that I know Chief Smith will talk about too. Tell me about those things.
Yeah, well, just from a background and context standpoint, so my dad actually was a retired Dallas police officer, served for 35 years. I have a ton of respect for all of our first responders, and particularly our police, and keeping us safe. And again, that public safety is important, you know. And even when you start talking about it from the extreme front line, the dispatch services, you know, we have a great team there that's really able to kind of get the information, really, whether or not it's to fire, EMS, or to our police protection as well. But no, I think we've got to continue to put safety, public safety, as priority number one. You know, again, our team has done a really good job so far. You know, I know we've been rated some of the, I don't know the exact level that we've been rated, but we've been rated several times, you know, one of the top safest cities in the state of Texas. And I think those are goals that we want to continue to achieve. You know, obviously we do want to make sure that we are, as I mentioned before, being good stewards of those dollars. I haven't necessarily gone through the budget cycle to see if there's anything that they're willing to throw out there right now that might kind of pull back on someone else's department. So obviously going to be open to it, but you know, we got to be tactful and make sure we're being, you know, good stewards of that, you know, at the end of the day as well. But oh yeah, a huge fan of the work that the police department's doing, and I work with them from a professional standpoint. There's one particular department that I usually get to kind of work with, and that's emergency preparedness director, which is Tanya Hunter. And again, I get to see them a little bit from a different vantage point, and I get to see them kind of like hands-on the work that they do. And so we've got a great police department, you know, great facility there at the Public Safety Center, and really proud of the work that they're going to continue to do.
As we kind of close out, what would you like the people to know about you? This is kind of where I let you kind of talk directly to them.
Yeah, I mean, I've mentioned several of these things already, but, you know, I want to make sure that the community knows that I am accessible and approachable. And that's one of the things, you know, again, feeling that weight that I mentioned earlier of running uncontested, right? You know, I didn't have to necessarily go through and do all the election process and go not do door walking and all that kind of fun stuff. But, you know, I did even have a meet and greet. I kind of wait till after the May 2nd election just not to confuse people. But, you know, I had one about a week and a half ago. And so I want to make sure that people know that I'm accessible, that I'm listening. And so one of the funny things was at that meet and greet, they were just like, someone came up to me and said, well, Kasey, you know everybody anyways. Why are you doing this? I was like, because I should, right? I said, because I'm not naive to feel like I know all 45,000 people that are here. So I want to hear from you. You know, I'll have a city email soon. And I did open up it's a public, you know, Kasey Cheshire Place 2 City Council page. Follow me there. You know, send me messages there. I want to hear feedback. If there's something that's really pertinent to you in your particular world, you know, I want to hear the feedback. I want to see your perspective. I want to see your lens. I want to make sure you know I'm listening. And again, I've talked about this already as well. You know, there's that calm and collective approach to leadership and that collaborative deal. And so that's important to me. I want to make sure that we're working together to solve those problems. And in the end, I just want to make sure that have a calm voice that helps Midlothian move forward in a positive way.
Thank you so much for wanting to serve your community in a leadership position. I tell everybody who runs and goes into government, because it's not an easy thing, and some people question your decisions. You're right. You can't see all 45,000. There's just so many different personalities. There's people who plugged in, and then people who plug in when something affects them. You know, there's that kind of deal. So there's so many different things, and you're putting yourself and your family into that. I mean, your family is involved and they go through it too. So I want you to know, like I do for everybody who's in our cities in Ellis County, I'm going to be praying for you. I know that's prayer is powerful, and I know that you're going to need it because there's going to be big decisions ahead. And, you know, you're going to need that kind of guidance in some way, shape, or form. So I want you to know that I will be praying for you, Kasey.
No, well, thank you, DV. And I'm excited for Tuesday. You know, as I get sworn in and take office, I'm excited to listen, learn, and work alongside this community and continue building a strong future for this community. And then, you know, and again, just like you just said, I definitely want to ask the viewers here. I ask for your prayers, you know, not just for me, but for our entire city council and for our city leadership. The decisions that we making, they impact our entire community. And I want to make sure that I'm approaching those with wisdom, with unity, and that servant's heart that's really true to me. And so I appreciate the opportunity to share today, and I appreciate your prayers.
Thank you. Can you stick around real quick after the show?